What's good, everyone? It's your boy Nati again. I've tried recording this several times, but here it goes. So this week's, based off of my previous timeline, this week's video was supposed to be about our Washington Nationals, the World Series champion Washington Nationals. But I, as well as so many people in America right now, particularly my Black brothers and sisters, we're in no way in a celebratory mood. And I felt that, even though this platform is relatively small, I wanted to speak up about these issues and I wanted to speak up about my thoughts on these issues. And after I saw the murder of George Floyd last week, I was completely broken, man. I was actually in the midst of writing a paper about global racial disparities in policing, and to see everything that I was discussing in the paper just show up in one occurrence, it was a lot, man. And it feels like just yesterday we were talking about Ahmaud Arbery and the hunting down from behind of an innocent black life in that situation, that occurrence. And then it also feels like just yesterday we were talking about Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old woman who was shot and killed in her own apartment because of mistaken identity. And just to see the officer force his knee upon George Floyd's neck, render him as less than human, and how many times we heard "I can't breathe" in that video, and to see the officer not let up and just kill him, it was a lot. And I was immediately reminded of Eric Garner and in the murder of Eric Garner, by the cops, a couple of years ago, and the "I can't breathe" and how that started up, and how we saw athletes wear the "I can't breathe" shirts, and to see something like that again in 2020, it just for 2 weeks, I couldn't last 2 weeks I couldn't sleep a lot of these nights. There were a lot of tears that I shed along with my sister, who, after she saw the video and after hearing how hurt she was, that broke me as well. And I know this is a sports channel per se, and I'm only supposed to be talking about sports and all this and that, but I feel like these sorts of issues, one, they're not political, and two, I have to talk about them, and it's a matter of life and death. And yeah, I was broken, and for a couple of days the only thing I could do is just like and retweet on Twitter, Instagram. There were a couple nights where I was mulling whether to make a post, and then I thought making a post wasn't, after I did that, after the Charlottesville situation a couple years ago, didn't really lead to change or anything, and I just thought that posting, I couldn't post, I couldn't do anything besides like and retweet, and it was tough. And then amidst all the other police brutality cases that we saw on the streets with people marching and protesting, and I did see some glimmers of hope. I saw people who were on the streets throughout the United States, not just in Minneapolis, kneeling, right? Standing shoulder to shoulder, protesting racial injustice. People of all races, ethnicities, creeds, religions, doesn't really matter. They were all there, and that gave me some hope. And I guess through those glimmers of hope, I thought, might as well do something, because I knew silence was just not the answer, and I couldn't just remain silent. Even as a black man, I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something to further the cause and fight for racial justice. So through that, I ultimately went and protested in DC with my friends and my sister, and it was also just a pretty powerful protest there too, because right in front of the White House we were kneeling and saying no justice, no peace, and calling out the police and doing all of that. And the media might not show that all the time. They might show the fires everywhere, the quote unquote rioting, stuff like that, the looting. But on last Sunday when I went and protested, like that was a pretty powerful moment. And I hope to do it even maybe this weekend or in the coming days. And then there's petitions that I sign, and I know many of you have signed, and hopefully more of you sign, calling for justice for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for Ahmaud Arbery, and so many more. And yeah, and also and then yesterday my sister did an awesome thing, and she organized her own protest, in our small school community. And to see her do that, it was amazing, and it just brought the community together around the issue of racial injustice, specifically around black people, and letting black people know that our lives really do matter. And in the midst of a global pandemic, we saw countless police brutality incidents, countless murders of innocent black men and women being caught on camera. We're reminded that we're facing not one virus, two viruses, and the second virus being the killing of innocent black men and women. And to see my sister organize that, it was powerful, and it really uplifted my spirits, and kind of really was the reason why I'm making this video, honestly, because I couldn't do it last week. I just couldn't do it. And with this channel, I also wanted to be able to share resources, be able to share links for you guys to share, for you guys to petitions for you guys to sign. And there's a George, and a lot of these resources I'll be writing out in the description. And Chase Leito, a college friend of mine, actually created a document with all these resources, and I'll make sure to link that in the description as well. But there's the George Floyd Memorial Fund, to help his family sort of, as best they could, sort of cope with the murder of a son, of a brother, a cousin. And then there's also petitions for Breonna Taylor, for George Floyd, for Ahmaud Arbery, like I said. There's also the I think it's the National Bail Network. I'll make sure to note that in the description. But to kind of sort of pay the bails for people who are being arrested on the streets, who are protesting, and a lot of them aren't able to really pay the bails in order to be released from jail. So there's that as well that I've kind of looked into over the last couple of days. There's also demanding action from local politicians, because I saw a lot of politicians just marching on the streets. And well, I guess cool, that solidarity, at the same time you're an elected official, you should be the one not just calling for change, but actually enacting that change, actually pushing that change through Congress, through local government, whatever it may be. And there's a recent bill by my sister actually let me know about it, by Representative Ayanna Pressley and Justin Amash, who was Republican but now independent. And they were passing a bill to put an end to qualified immunity, which basically was a legal principle that allowed for cops to not be, for civil action lawsuits to not be filed against cops. And they're pushing that bill, pretty bipartisan bill, through Congress right now, and demand your local leaders, in Northern Virginia, Maryland, even in DC, to pass that law, to actually enact change. Because how many of these murders, how many of these killings of innocent black lives are we gonna see, man? And obviously, Trump's not making it better, right? He's supporting Drew Brees' statement about kneeling in front of the flag. And how many racist sentiments has he spewed out over the years? And I understand that, and trust me, I know. At the same time, these murders, these killings of innocent black men and women have been, occurring even in democratic administration, any sort of administration, at the top level. And I think it's important to sort of demand our local leaders to finally say enough is enough and actually pass this legislation, not just be all talk. And, vote. Like, obviously, vote on the federal level, right? With the presidential election coming up, but also like for local leaders, like, we saw voting work in Ferguson. I think it was on CNN. They just said that they elected their first black mayor in Ferguson. 6 years after the protest there, and that's just might be a small change, but that's change. That's getting somewhere, and I think voting is very important. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, voting one person, like, what am I gonna do?" Right? Like, especially if you come from a pretty heavily blue or pretty red leaning state, like, you're gonna think, oh, there's no point in voting. But when you vote as a collective, when you get enough people, when you use platforms like these and even bigger platforms to kind of spread the message that voting is important, as President Obama always does, as so many prominent people always do, it's important because that collective could mean, the difference between Trump being reelected or Biden be elected, or even on the local level, like the mayor in Ferguson being elected. So voting is important. And then, for people who are not immunocompromised or don't have family members that are immunocompromised, there's protests, man. Like, for me, protests, it was a difficult decision, obviously, with coronavirus and everything and being worried about, like, safety and all that. But I ultimately protested with friends, and that itself uplifted my spirits, like, it gave me hope, because hope is something that we all need at this point, because it's running out, man. There's no more. I've tried recording this video many times, and every time I've been on the verge of shedding tears, and at this point, I don't have any more tears to shed. I know so many people in the black community don't have any more tears to shed, and we're calling for action. We're calling for change and protesting. We're in the DMV area. This is DMV Sports Zone. We're fortunate enough to be so close to the White House, to be so close to the Capitol, where we can go and protest, even with Trump putting that barricade right in front of the White House and sort of, or one could say wall, right in front of that White House and protecting himself. Like, you can go there, you can still protest, you can still protest in DC, and we need to use that, for those, again, who are able to. And yeah, and then lastly, this is something that's super important, something that I also have needed to work on, but just calling out, like, family members and friends who, say all lives matter as a rebuke to, like, Black Lives Matter, and say they're for the movement, but we know behind closed doors they're not. Like, we have to be able to confront them. And I'm not just talking about black people, I'm talking about white people, non-POC, non-black POCs. Confront your friends, because black people, we're tired. We're tired of it. My sister and I talk about this all the time. We're just tired. We're tired of seeing these incidents. We're tired of seeing racism. We're tired of seeing racial prejudice. We're tired of seeing the system being stacked against us every now and then, or not every now and then, every now, every single moment, Like, our lives. But again, discuss these issues with friends, discuss these issues with family members, because enough is enough. Sadly, it took George Floyd's murder to get to this point where, so many people that are not black, that are even not POCs, are, like, speaking out and stuff, and that's sad. But at the same time, like, you use this moment to speak out, to tell your family members that racism is not all right. To say, I saw it in this one video, to say, oh, those black people, like, in the inner cities, like, they're in the streets, they're in the ghetto, right? Like, they do harm upon themselves. Black on black violence is something that we always hear. Like, when people don't really pay attention to the percentages, right, of people who kill black people, and we always hear those sentiments. And for me personally, like, I've needed to do a better job in calling those things out, and calling my friends out and everything. But I'm speaking again to specifically non-black POCs and white people who can't really speak on the black experience but could help their black friends and black family members. And yeah, again, I don't have any more tears to shed. I'm done. Like,